Welcome, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining me on another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, this is where we talk about cloud. Boy, that is such a big word today, and it is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, we talk about all things cloud. No holds barred. Anything that has to do with cloud, we're going to talk about it with a bit of a slant towards cloud security. Now, you all know I'm no expert. I'm the Gilligan in this equation, but I know where to find them. And I'm so excited today because we get to have a chance to talk to someone that, not only have I known for a few years, but the guy is just deep in the industry, deep in security, deep in the cloud, lots of stories to tell, and I know this is going to be a great episode. So I'm going to let Rand tell you all about his storied background, and I'm really, really super excited. Now, one thing I'm going to just call that out right straight up, buddy. I am not going to try to say the name of the company you're with today because I know I'll butcher it, and I'm going to look forward to hearing you saying it properly so I don't say it incorrectly and misrepresent you. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm really thrilled today to have Mr. Rand Nahamis, who is the Chief Business Officer and co-founder for the company that he's going to say. Rand, it's great you're here, man. Thank you so much.
Rand, thank you. It's really nice to be back on stage with you and talk a little bit.
So how do you say the name?
So the name is actually a funny story because you promised story. The company is called Cyberpion, and the pion is comes from chemistry, and it's part of one of the particles of the atom, chemistry, physics, and in many cases, people think about the pion from the chessboard, especially now with the Gambit TV series that everybody is looking at. But we actually, Nathaniel, our founder, came from physics and chemistry backgrounds, and that was his thought.
Now that makes a lot more sense. And I actually thought it was a play on champion or something like that. So thank you. That's pretty cool. So now you guys tell us what Cyberpion does.
So Cyberpion is doing cybersecurity in what we call the ecosystem of enterprises. It's also referred to by some other industry players as the attack surface. But unlike what I've done in the last 25 years, Cyberpion is looking from the outside in on the enterprise, the different connections that the enterprise has to resources, platforms, infrastructures, and third-party providers, analyzes the posture and context of those connections, and looking for threats, misconfigurations, and other holes that may be conduit for vulnerabilities and exploits.
Is it all cloud, any cloud? Are you an on-prem? Talk a little bit about how you get deployed where you work.
Yeah, so, as you did in the preface, I don't think there's any enterprise that doesn't have cloud anymore. So that's no longer a question. The question is how much cloud and how many clouds do you have? Let me maybe start with a little example of what it is that we do, and then I will point to what is on-prem and what is cloud.
Yeah, that's good. As I'm actually thinking through, I'm thinking, okay, what you said is outside in for the enterprise for cloud. I'm interested in understanding more.
So let's think about a bank that decides to put a banner on their homepage. And the banner will display real share prices or stock prices from multiple markets. The Chicago commodities market, New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, for example.
Okay.
Someone from the marketing department is going to choose a vendor. As we all live in the same world now, we know that the vendor choice is very often, if not always, driven by price. And the marketing person will choose someone who's on the lower range of the prices, hopefully reputable, and that is being used by other banks that the marketing person knows. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about it, that vendor is actually consolidating data from 3 different stock markets. Those stock markets don't really push that data themselves. They have another vendor that they took on their end to push that data out to other places. The vendor that is doing the consolidation is also sophisticated, so he's doing some tracking on where you are logging from and is likely to give you the nearest market to you. There is also how it looks. So they're doing they're taking all of the fonts and unifying them into a single font that they pull from a font bucket on AWS or Azure. And what you experience as a consumer is something that runs on the website of your bank. When we analyze this ecosystem that makes this possible, that specific little thing, we're looking at anywhere between 12 to 28 providers in a common configuration today in the marketplace.
When you say, I don't mean to interrupt, Rand, when you say providers, you're talking about other people in that supply chain, that digital supply chain, on providing that information to me where I am?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. And again, some of them will be the ones who do the formatting of the fonts to look the same. There will be something that is identifying where you are. So if you think about the same bank in a region like APAC, where those 3 stock markets may be 3 different countries that are in proximity, then based on the country you log in from, someone identifies that and feeds that local market to you. You can also make choices in your bank and say, hey, Mr. Bank, always show me only NASDAQ, because that's the only market that I'm interested in. And all of those configurations and consolidations are done by multiple tools across that supply chain, that online supply chain, which we refer to as an ecosystem, because in practice, what happens is it's an ecosystem that serves you and others in very similar fashion. We have one of the largest banks in the U.S. As a customer, and this is based on a true story that happened there. We examined, so we have sensors all over the internet, and we're looking at those connections, how they react, how they respond to each other, and where else they are connected to. We found that 3 degrees away from our customer, there was a server that was serving fonts, and that server also had a permanent connection to a CNC, command and control, which is a hacking practice, server in the Eastern Bloc. Now, why would a font server have that kind of connection? I will let each one of you use their imagination, but nothing good can come out of that. I think that we can all agree on.
Right.
Our bank found that there was actually an exploit being built by pieces of code that were injected along with the fonts all the way upstream to their website. Now, the exploit, had it matured or completely built itself, would have captured logging information of both employees and customers going from the main page to the respective areas. And the interesting thing is that most of the security people that we partner with within our customers find themselves in a bit of a dilemma, because what we find is vulnerabilities, exploits, and risks stemming out of third-party vendors. So as a security person, you can't just go and fix it. You have to figure out how to fix it, who's the vendor, and what it is you want to do about it. And it actually raises some very interesting questions, because, there was a debate on whether or not the font provider was part of the scheme, or was he taken over by hackers and exploited, right? You never really know from a distance, because this is not anyone you ever did business with. So all of this creates, it's a very fascinating area. In 20-something years in security, I've never thought about the ecosystem as a ground play for hackers. And it provides a very challenging paradigm for the security people that we're working with in how to respond to those threats.
That's extraordinary. What I think of, and you, I'm sure, recall, this was popular a few years ago where it seemed like as the advertising infrastructure grew, you started to have a much, much larger ecosystem and various, this food chain from big animals all the way down to little small ones in little markets. And so similar to what you're talking about, it's this hyper-connected ecosystem of agencies and networks that are all sharing and passing on and sharing. And obviously, if I'm sending and receiving packets with you, something's open, right? And there was a lot of exploits that were taking place within these smaller advertising networks, largely unbeknownst to the operators because they were just unaware that they'd been taken over. But that's the world we live in today, isn't it? That hyper-connected digital supply chain. Who's really looking at it? That's what it sounds like you guys are really looking at.
We are, and that all of this connected ecosystem also grew exponentially over the last year with the sudden move to change the way business is being done.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, banks that used to make you come in and sign paperwork and show your driver's license and a second form of ID are now actually doing all of this online with vendors that they hired. I mean, they didn't have months to plan and develop their own capabilities. So a lot of what we do today is actually based on a hybrid of multiple third parties in an effort to allow and replace in-person interactions across many industries.
Yeah.
And building it so quickly from both sides, from the provider side and from the customer side, created an environment that is never super tight, well-planned, and secure 100%. And the governance of it is somewhat elusive. I mean, who is responsible for what part of it is a question that doesn't have a real answer right now in most organizations.
Scarecrow answer, right? Which way did he go? And he points both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's extraordinary. I think, I was talking with a good friend of mine, colleague, who is now got a startup, but he was talking with one of his customers, and it was a CISO who really summed up, I thought, what the problem is in the cloud in just a couple of simple words. And it was, speed equals risk, right? The faster you can, it is directly proportionate to the increased risk as compared to not going fast, right? I mean, speed, and it's what we all love about the cloud, right? That it is so fast, so agile, so capable. But it's also, as you just so accurately put it, especially in this digital transformation that's been forced, people are sloppy when they have to go fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, sloppy is one word. I think that a lot of people are being tasked to do things that they haven't prepared for, that they don't have enough knowledge of.
Sure, and that's, I apologize to anybody if sloppy was a derogatory term, but it's easy to make mistakes as you increase speed.
Yes, that's definitely true. Behind that, I can stand.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because I think there are people that are really good, but, they're being forced to move faster, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the reality is that it's going to continue that way, right? I mean, I don't think it's going to slow down. I think that cloud adoption that was forced on many organizations, forced them to not only rethink their approach to cloud, but also identify the benefits and the ease of use, and how do you do it now in distributed workforces. The cloud is becoming, even a bigger advantage than it was before that.
Yeah.
Because, you don't have 3 people who can walk into a data center at any given moment, sitting in the office, and can handle emergencies. Whereas in the cloud, it's, I want to call it almost self-healing situation. When one server craps out,
yep.
It's a virtual one, and you can bring a replacement up and running in minutes.
Yep. Or even seconds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that this is here to stay, and so ecosystem security is a new vector of attack.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many attacks we track. A lot of hacking campaigns. A lot of the engagement we have with customers is when we have a customer that we're seeing getting affected by a hacking campaign, and then we continue to track the hacking campaign. And as it leaves its footsteps on different environments of other enterprises, today we captured what's visible from tracking that campaign, and actually reach out to those organizations and say, hey, we're tracking a campaign. Here's an ethical disclosure of a couple of findings, and we're happy to help you explore deeper into your ecosystem. But, we are now the good Samaritans in many cases, where we reach out to a CISO and say, hey, here are some findings that you need to address, and we're happy to help you find more. Many of them, this is their first introduction to the ecosystem as a security vector that they need to start paying attention to.
Right. Or maybe even didn't know that they were as hyper-connected as they are.
Yeah. One of the things that is amazing to us, and I'll use an example of a customer earlier this week. We did a discovery. The first thing we do is a discovery, and as we were running the discovery, we came up with just over 20,000 assets belonging to this customer. The customer is a global banking conglomerate with many acquisitions and mergers, so this has to be taken into account. But of the 20-odd thousand assets we found, the bank governance in the security team was tracking almost 11,000. 9,000 of those assets were not under governance at the bank when we finished the initial scan.
Wow.
Which was stunning to them as much as it was for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. I got to mention something. You were talking earlier about how there's, everything has changed. Banks would want you to come in to sign things, and now that's the last thing they want. It's all under the guise of security, right? In your protection. And I thought it was funny because I was on a plane, and I think she said, we're not going to demonstrate how to use the oxygen mask or the life vest for your protection. And I just kind of chuckled to myself because it's for our protection now. They're not going to show us.
Yeah. I envy you for being on planes.
So how long have you been around? Obviously raising money. You're going out there getting customers. You've got a product. Is it a SaaS product? Is it what is it?
So the company has been around for 4 years, and 2 years ago there was the pivot into the ecosystem security from something else the company did before that. And it is a SaaS offering that can be procured directly from us or through the AWS or Azure marketplaces.
Brilliant.
And we're going fast. We just did a big round of funding, a very few months ago of just north of $8 million.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's always good to have dough.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And we're getting some more from customers. So we're over 20 paying customers worldwide. We're sitting in the Fortune 100 with a few customers, a couple in the US, a couple of them in the US, and then the global 100. We have a few more outside of the US.
Brilliant.
And we're growing rather quickly. It's challenging times to grow new products. I think that the attention span of the audiences within prospects is very limited to seeing new things. But again, starting our interactions with a responsible disclosure is actually helping us gain 15 or 30 minutes of someone's time to make an initial impression, which is very helpful in what we do.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. I think of turning my binoculars around and having a different perspective, right? We tend to always everybody's focusing in, and for you to kind of turn that turret around and look at the world differently, I could see how that really offers an enlightening perspective for your clients. Are the people you're talking with generally the team that's managing and maintaining security of the cloud? I suspect that'd be where it is.
So, our product goes through multiple vectors of attacks. Some of them are being PKI, DNS, and cloud. And so while the budget for the procurement is almost always comes from security, it really depends on who started the interaction with us and what pillar was the leading pillar in the sales process. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, our biggest customer is using us mostly for the discovery. I mean, they just love our ability to discover more and more of their assets as we go. There's also some organizations are large enough or planned in a way that they have supply chain risk management teams within the security team.
Right.
And those are usually the optimal teams for us because they can oversee all of the four pillars that we provide value through. Yep,
that makes sense. Because that's really what we're talking about, right? It's the digital supply chain. You can't track that on a highway or a freeway somewhere.
Yeah. And again, supply chain is very specific. The ecosystem, supply chain is things that, we find that when we say supply chain, we said initially supply chain, people think about the 5 vendors that go to them, which is 1 degree away. Mm-hmm. The unique thing that we do and no one else in the marketplace does today is the ability to go 2, 3, and to the nth degree of connections that are the ecosystem that is feeding into your supply chain and then into your organization.
So what you're saying is, so I understand it, is I may have agreements with 10 different digital suppliers and they're in place, but I don't know what agreements they may have with someone else digitally to acquire or share information. Are you saying your product does look at that level?
Yeah, we go through the connections of those suppliers to others, understand which of those others actually play a role into what feeds into you, and rate the risk of that based on all of the potential hops along the way. And the bigger it is, the riskier it gets just by definition. Mm-hmm. But, if you go, do you have any idea, and I'm sorry to take you on a guessing game, when you go to the webpage of the Wall Street Journal, www.wsj.com.
Yep.
How many things do you think are connected to that page? How many providers
today
are part of this ecosystem?
I know exactly where you're going, but it's got to be in the hundreds at least, and if not quite a bit more, right? Of all because they're aggregating all of these different sources that are coming from somewhere else, right?
So we're looking at one web page. There's 160 connected networks into it, 711 assets that have direct connection into what you're viewing. And those go between advertising, content, tag management, analytics, marketing, developer utilities, social media, text, JSON, HTML, JavaScript, XML, video, fonts, and binary codes. It's amazing.
I got to tell you, Rand, never did I think there was an organization that would unify fonts, like you were talking about earlier. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, think every reporter or every feed has a favorite font, but you want to display a unified one. You don't want the stock market from New York Stock Exchange coming Arial, and what comes from NASDAQ coming in the David font, right? You want them all to look the same.
Yeah. That's something. Boy, it was never a problem when you just selected the Courier 10 wheel.
Yeah, but that's nobody's doing that anymore.
Yeah, I know. I said it that way because I knew most of my guests would not chuckle like I knew you would. Well, this is exciting. So you mentioned your marketplace. Are you also going through partners? Is it a channel play as well?
There is a channel play. We're putting the wagon ahead of the horses. We're going to announce our channel program in the next week or so. Oh. And we already have select channels and resellers in North America and Europe.
I'm honored to think that this disclosure is coming on Talking Cloud. I'm going to have to hurry and get this out on the wire for the world to hear it here.
Great.
Yeah, that's really terrific. And you've already got partners. Do you find, look, you've been around for a long time, Ren. We've known each other for more than 20 years. It seems like there is a growing, I don't want to use maybe chasm or gap between the channel and the people that really are cloud first, cloud native, cloud centric, and those that are still dragging along all the other stuff and trying to be cloud. Do you see that, or are you seeing it getting more blended today?
I think that I think that the reality is that many of the channels are still in the age of pushing boxes, and have not necessarily started their own transformation from a technology perspective. Also, there's a good question to be asked is what is the role of the channel in the cloud where most of it is done online? And what will the channel do when customers go 50, 60, 80 and 100% into the cloud and do not have even where to put those boxes anymore?
Yeah, it's such a good point.
And what's the role? I think that the channels that we see that have actually did a good transformation and hold both ends of that are channels that understand that they need to go to where me and you were much younger used to be VARs, and focus on the value add that they bring to the customer versus the transactional process.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that customers, in many cases, people are getting tasked with doing things that are out of what they know how to do. And this is where the channel can bring value if they're doing the value add process and bringing expertise and capabilities that the customer does not have in-house.
Yep.
Because what we do is so new, channels get most of the revenue in our deals by doing services after the sale and not just on the sale itself. Because, we go to a customer and we come up with 2,000 action items that needs to be addressed. And the customer, many people just go like, how do I even deal with 2,000 things?
Yeah.
And the good channels saying, we can help you manage this and prioritize and do sort of a project management along it. So you are prepared and know how we're going from here to there within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And those are the channels that we work with and actually are very successful both for us and for their own business.
I think you're spot on in terms of it's almost like it's cyclical, like so often we do see, in the sense that, we used to be highly consolidated, the data center mainframe, then it got distributed, then it went back. We're kind of arguably back more to that highly consolidated now in the cloud. But, we've also seen some cycles in the channel where before the box stores and the bifurcation took place, there were dealers. And then the bifurcation took place and there were stack 'em high, watch 'em fly, and as you put it, VARs, right? The non-storefronts. And it seemed like there was this acute awareness of value-added services, value add. And it's almost like we've fallen back in, and maybe it's because there's such a great consumption, right? There's a large appetite for technology that they fall back into that transactional. But now the shift in technology, isn't the marketplace itself, the cloud itself, a fantastic channel? Their value has to come somewhere else, right?
Yeah. And while the cloud providers leave room for the channels in the pricing model, by the way, they really look to the channels to do more than just the transaction, but help the customer in the transformation, help the resources within the customer to understand the priorities, to do proper planning, because the success of the transformation is the ground success of the cloud providers.
Right.
If customers go and botch up their environments or their day-to-day operation, yep, the cloud will have a bad reputation. So the cloud providers, in almost in a weird way, are really concerned with the quality of the channel and the advice and the guidance and the expertise they bring to the table for their customers, so the customers have a good, positive experience and continue to transition to the cloud faster and bigger.
Yeah, that's interesting. There really is an enormous opportunity because of the forced transformation, the speed at which it has occurred and continues to occur. We talked about the challenge with speed. There is a big opportunity because they think the cloud is real simple and easy, but there's a lot of nuances and differences. And I always say it doesn't take long when you start scratching on the paint to get down to technical metal in the cloud, right? It's a pretty vast technical environment that I would suggest most enterprises aren't equipped to fully take advantage of. What do you think?
I agree. Think about it. It's like taking a driver who's been driving a Chevy all of his life and putting him in a space shuttle and telling him to run the dashboard and take off.
I laugh because, I was thinking you might say Tesla, but that's actually more accurate, because that is truly what it's like.
Yeah. And there's also some blame to be put on the manufacturers that those channels are working with today. Some of the manufacturers still hold on to their past. Yep. And have not leaped forward, and so they don't push their channels they keep pushing on the channels to maintain what's becoming slowly becoming a legacy business, yep, of appliances, instead of leaping forward, because they haven't done that. Yeah. And so it's created a weird dynamics within, because, we see in different industries how one vendor is really either brand new to the industry. If you think about the antivirus industry, CrowdStrike is a cloud-born company, and they're competing with McAfee and Norton, who've been on-prem for all of their existence and genetics and mechanisms and everything. Yeah. And it's almost an unfair fight, right? It's a fight that is happening, but the success of CrowdStrike in that example is that they've come from the cloud, and they understand that the cloud is where people go. Yep. And so when people make the transition, and the McAfee or the Norton or the Trend Micro are somewhat behind on the cloud, and there's this new hype CrowdStrike in the cloud, they just go to CrowdStrike. They don't try to drag the other ones forcefully forward. Yeah. Yep. And it creates a very interesting dynamics in the market, and the antivirus or the endpoint security is not that. I think it goes across many of the cybersecurity technologies where there's, resellers are used to the bigger profits in pushing a box. The vendors are used to the bigger profits of pushing a box. And where you go to software only, the value, the scale is likely to grow exponentially. But it's baby steps. And you say, do I sell a box for $500,000 or do I go chase a deal of $25,000 in the cloud?
Yep.
For someone who's living on commission, the answer is clear.
Yep.
And as long as the vendors are not changing that from their end, many of the partners will stay in this illusion that they can continue and pushing boxes. But soon there will be nowhere to put those boxes on the customer side.
Yeah, I totally agree. False reality. I mean, when I was at Blue Coat several years ago, we had an enormous opportunity to replace a bunch of on-premise proxies with virtual proxies. And this was at a very large cloud provider. And this was at a time when we had available virtual images that we sold licks for, right? Because that's the way you did it and had done it forever. But this particular vendor was quite adamant. I need to be able to consume that virtual technology in my marketplace. And we didn't have it. Now, it wasn't because we didn't have the product, the technology. We had a nasty conundrum with the dollars and cents part that we hadn't figured out. And so I completely agree. I think this is a real challenge for the industry overall that's been living in a fixed, tangible, asset-based world and moving to the virtual. It's creating some consternation for some, no doubt. It reminds me of, you've read the book by Christensen, right? Innovator's Dilemma.
Yeah.
There's some similarities, right? This company that forever has looked at building an installable app that you distribute in laptops, a la antivirus, right? And then all of a sudden the world changed right from underneath their feet. And that's not, like you said, that's not just antivirus, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes across the board.
It sure does. And I think you can expect to see more and more. I mean, I've often proposed we're entering a perfect storm where everything can be reconsidered. And what I mean is we're now ubiquitously connected with a supercomputer with an unbelievable amount of compute and bandwidth, right? All the time. My phone is a supercomputer, 5G, all the time. Now, I really think everything can be reconsidered. Where's the compute occur? Where does it get stored? How does it get stored? I talked with somebody about creating a program that is crowdsourcing storage and using bandwidth. It saves it everywhere by just sending out a bit here and a bit there, just as an algorithm and a means by which you obfuscate and create security around the data. But I think, there's some really interesting things that are going to be coming out in the next few years.
I think we are going through another technology revolution when it comes to cloud compute, and what the devices will be using are going to look like.
Yeah. I saw just the other day a good friend of mine who was on one of my earlier podcasts, Evan Kirstel. He posts the world's smallest camera, 200 by 200 pixel camera, and it looked like a piece of broken lead off of your number 2 pencil. It was remarkable, and also maybe a little frightening, right? To wonder where that thing's going to be.
I think you should assume everywhere.
Yeah, right? It's so true. So you've said 4 pillars multiple times. Why don't you explain those?
So the pillars that we're looking at is web. So all of the connections that your web-facing infrastructure has to others. And, when we say connections, think about links, right? I mean, I embed a hyperlink that goes to another place, and nobody ever checks if that link is continuing to be valid. And we've seen a lot of cases where
404 errors or what
404
page
errors
not found?
are the good outcome, I think. Some of those, when a hacker realizes that opportunity, they buy that link address. It was a web address that used to be someone's and is no longer theirs. And they build a fake site where you're encouraged to do things. And since, you went to the bank and you click a link and it takes you to another page that looks like the bank, you might be off guard when they ask you to put your credentials in. So this is a very simple example of a web connection that is broken and can be exploited into something unpleasant. So this is the web. All of the web connections are one facet of what we're looking at. The cloud, all of your connections in the cloud, not from a cloud governance perspective, but what is it that you consume from other cloud ecosystem resources? Again, the font, the S3 bucket of fonts is a good example, where it may belong to Adobe or it may be pretending to belong to Adobe, but this is a cloud connection that you have that, again, is not being monitored by any current security tools. DNS, so there's a lot of DNS things that can go wrong in how they point someone. You go from one place to another, and the IP address and the web address that a consumer or a link puts in is getting resolved with the DNS server, and there's a lot of areas and opportunities to change that, especially in cloud environments where the DNS is a dynamic resource that goes up and down and changes along with your regions and how you deploy it in the cloud and so forth. So we're validating and tracking all of the DNS and PKI certificates. There's a lot of abuse of certificates, and there's a lot of negligence. Very often we see, again, a font server that seems legitimate, but when we look into the PKI certificate, we see that it expired in 2008. And you ask yourself, is this really a managed asset of a reputable company? In many cases, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Now, we're taking those four facets, if you will, and then we are putting them all together into our AI brain, and we overlay things such that two pieces of the four may create a prism that shows you a risk or a vulnerability that you would have not seen by looking at each one of those separately. This is our secret sauce. And we're adding more pillars like this. And so...
So do you help me ensure that I'm rotating my keys on a regular interval as opposed to what so often doesn't occur?
We can tell you, we help you identify when keys are what we call stagnant.
Right.
We don't do the key management. But we encourage you to do. And if you do the integration with your SOC or your SIEM or your ticketing system that we support, this will create a ticket that says here and there needs to be action 1, 2, 3 needs to occur.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all it is it's that, nudge, right?
Yeah.
Ran, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed learning and understanding not only how to properly pronounce Cyberpion, but to really understand what's behind the name. I thought that was really interesting, but I really think it's very cool what you guys are doing. It's not the traditional posture management and the whole infra play. I love the inside out kind of approach you guys are taking. Very, very innovative. So I really appreciate you taking time and telling us all about it.
Oh, thank you very much, Grant. It was really nice to chat with you again. It's been too long, and we should do it more often.
Yes, please. Hopefully we'll get through all this soon. And while I don't ever expect that we're going to go 100% back to how we used to be, I am looking forward to sitting down with friends like you and having a beer. So I'm looking forward to getting a chance to do that with you, Ran.
I would love that.
So thank you again very much. Ladies and gentlemen, another one in the books. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I don't think it's me. I think it's my guests. We just keep getting better. This has been terrific. I really appreciate you tuning in and listening. And if you like what you're hearing, Tell your friends, share it. We want to get as many people talking cloud as we possibly can. So thank you all very, very much. We'll look forward to seeing you back here again on the next episode of Talking Cloud.